Joining me live right now is my very good friend, Dr. Joe Congini from Sports Medicine Center at Akron Children's Hospital. Here, Joe, what do you have for us coming off the July 4th holiday?
Hey, Ray, I really thought you needed to hear a little primer on concussion. You and I haven't talked about concussion in a while.
Correct.
And unfortunately, one of the guardians obliged and had some struggles with a concussion. And it brought up a couple of points for us to step back. There hasn't been a lot of new stuff. I looked some stuff up for speaking this morning about this topic, but there are some things that are new, but a couple points that are worth going back to, especially with contact sports seasons of soccer and football coming up. Austin Hedges, is the Indians catcher, and he is out right now with concussion. They retrospectively put him on the injured list, and so he's been out. The Guardians had to scramble and sign Sandy Leone to play at catcher. Right now the whole team is kind of struggling a little bit, but the catcher, Austin Hedges, had a concussion last year at about this time, and a couple points that brings up. I did notice that he thought he was close to getting back. He passed some of the protocol, and then as he started to move towards getting back, I read a note from Tito saying that he just didn't feel right, and he went for a second opinion over to Pittsburgh. But one of the things that we've always, for many years, talked about, and I want everybody as a baseline to know about this that's important, is the vast majority of concussions recover in about 7 to 14 days. About 80% of them get better within a week or two. The average is about 10 days. The kids and people that get concussion, our young athletes, are generally most symptomatic in that first week, but then the concussion seems to clear or improve on its own in many cases. Now, what we deal with at places like sports medicine, sports doctors, and other people that work with athletes is that 20% that's not getting better. So I'm just going to focus on that a little today. Austin Hedges now is getting over that range. He had a concussion a year ago, as I mentioned. I think the one that occurred a year ago was secondary to getting hit by a pitch. This year's was from a foul tip. It would be obvious that catchers would be the position in baseball that's most at risk for concussions. And so I don't know his previous concussion history, but it brings up a little concern when you know that he's had these two in the last couple of years. So the risk factors for a second concussion or a prolonged concussion lasting longer than that 2 weeks, you know that we always, in following sports, know some of these concussions last 2 months or 4 months, or sometimes they're career-threatening. But the majority, the good news is clear by 2 weeks. But some of the risk factors, a really good study that I reviewed last night, relatively recent study, showed the number one risk factor is if you've had previous concussions. There are at least a 2-time increased incidence of having another concussion or prolonged recovery from a concussion if you had one previous concussion or multiple previous concussions. Number two is obvious too, what contact sports you play. So contact sports, not necessarily baseball, unless you're a catcher. We watch, if you watch baseball games throughout the summer, which I know you do, you know what a tough position it is for foul tips, for plays at the plate, and other issues like that. So contact sports, also a high risk. Number three, finally, the studies are really kind of showing that female athletes, and they really have looked closely, and it's particularly female women's soccer players are definitely, so they rate these now by research, A, B, C, previous concussion A, contact sports A, female athlete and especially women's soccer B, previous history of migraines B, younger age is B. I, long being on the fields of kids before high school, have said that the earliest concussions that occur in pre-high school are ones that usually take longer to recover and have a real risk, unfortunately, for second concussion, and that's been bared out by the research. if you had multiple symptoms when you presented. And so if you had just one symptom of headache or one symptom of dizziness for a period, not as high a risk. If you had all the symptoms, and there's 22 different symptoms of dizziness, visual symptoms, hearing issues, headache, memory loss, and many of these symptoms that we call a global concussion, you're at a higher risk to have another concussion. Also, this was a newer one, longer duration of headache. If the headache lasted longer from the initial concussion, it's B is the research chances that you would have a longer concussion. Memory loss also is definitely one that's associated now, and that's relatively newer. The two that we're not by looking at, loss of consciousness or somebody who comes into this with hyperactivity disorders. They did not find any relationship to second concussions or prolonged concussions. So I wanted to cover that today as we move into a season where contact sports pick up and our concussion clinic unfortunately picks up. I think we're doing a better job. You and I have spent a lot of time talking about all the things we've tried to do prevention-wise, and overall, since we're giving out grades, I would say in the last 15 years of sports medicine, we would probably get a B- in what we've done to prevent concussions. And I think it has gotten some better, but we have a ways to go, and we're still studying research. We're still doing all we can in due diligence to keep kids from getting even the first concussion. But I think that's a little bit of an update today related to the Indians catcher, Austin Hedges.
I agree, and spot on there, Joe, as well. I think we've made great strides, and we still have more to take for sure. Good visit, Joe. Thanks, as always, for making time with us, Joe, here on WAKR, my friend.
Hey, thanks a lot, Ray. Have a great rest of the week, okay?
You too. Dr. Joe Congini, Sports Medicine Center, Akron Children's Hospital. He's been with us 25 years.